Okay, we're going to call to order the meeting of the school board. The only item on the agenda this evening is the reopening plan. I'd like to start by thanking the members of the reopening committee who put their time and effort into, and the administration as well, putting their time and effort into crafting what I think is a conservative and responsible plan going forward. I hope that we can revisit and using the toolkit included in the plan to continue to revisit this issue, but I appreciate the work, and on behalf of the board, we all appreciate the work that's been put in by everybody into making this, into putting this plan together. So I would accept a motion from the board to approve the reopening plan that has been submitted with the highlighted, and I think everyone has a copy of the plan with the highlighted additions or changes.
Make a motion.
Thank you, Joe. Do you have a second?
A second.
Thank you, Jasmine. Is there any discussion from the board on that issue?
Well, I just got it. This was not emailed with these new, since the changes you made last night.
Yeah, these were.
Yeah, it was
we did
emailed
get these.
hours ago. I emailed it like
Yeah, see, I don't get full emails. I can't get
Yeah.
it.
It was sent to both your, or should have been sent to both your email address.
I got it at 12:30.
Yeah,
Me
it's
too.
about
I
that.
didn't get a chance to.
The reopening committee, I'm assuming that it was unanimous that they all wanted this, or?
Yeah, so well, the reopening committee met yesterday for about an hour and a half. They made some recommendations, and these are the recommendations that have come out of that reopening committee. So I don't, based on, I wasn't at the meeting, but based on my understanding of the meeting, I wouldn't say that all the recommendations were unanimous, but these are the recommendations that the committee is putting forward for the board to consider.
How much variance is there going to be with discretion to changing back and forth through masking, unmasking, indoors, outdoors? Is that a weekly,
So
bi-weekly? Are we going to actually utilize the form to?
monthly is what the
make-
monthly is what
is
the
it
plan says.
monthly meeting, sit down, taking information, or is it
So the
a phone call? I guess is what I'm saying.
well, so the I think the toolkit that is referenced in here pretty well handles how to evaluate when it would be appropriate to allow some sort of optional or targeted masking. And so it's just based on numbers, and you put those, basically into a rubric that's on page 6, and it'll tell you where you are in that rubric. And so basically, right now, based on the community transmission rates being substantial in Grafton County, the recommendation is universal masking. In a month from now, we'll be able to reevaluate where we're at as far as the factors that they're looking for, which is community transmission in the cases within the facility, to make a determination about whether or not we can ease those mandatory restrictions or if we need to keep them in place.
But I think that's the question: is when are we gonna set a date? It's
For-
August 25th today. Are we setting a date for September 25th that we're going to review this? Or
What's
Like, are we
whether we uphold it or not, it should be reviewed on a.
I think in here, right, it says monthly.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think it would make sense to do it a few days in advance of the school board meeting so that the school board can review any decision before it gets implemented as far as what we're going to do. So, I don't, when's our second meeting in September? 24th. So I think maybe if we did the review of the stuff and it was brought to the board on that meeting, put on the agenda for that meeting.
September
that-
what?
24th? The second? Sorry. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, that makes
Our
sense.
second.
22nd, not 24th.
Yeah, so the 20th.
What about athletics outside of our school?
Outside the building, supposedly it's.
So outdoors is, the masking is not required.
Other than on transportation.
Other than on transportation, I think the schools where we travel to will typically be the ones who dictate what we're doing. And I think that there's ongoing discussions about what level of athletics is going to happen, just as they happened last year.
Right.
I guess what I'm saying is, if the English department took a student to another school for some kind of poetry or some kind of reading, et cetera, type thing, are they bound by our rules, or because they're going to a school that has no mask, are we just gonna let them go?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many schools are going to be allowing outside students into them at this point, but to the extent that, yeah,
Right now, the schools that we are sending kids to, when we talk about CTE programs, they are asking people, I take that back. The White Mountains Regional is asking people to wear masks, and Littleton, it is optional.
so that's for the
That's for the CTE programs.
I think, are you talking about more like extracurricular type?
No, I'm just saying, when we move our students that we're required to wear a mask in our school to a school that has an optional option, are we going to keep them in the masking protocol when they're there? Then it seems counterproductive to send them to a place that's not masking if that's what we're trying to do. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I don't know how often that's going to happen, given the current
I
state
don't
of
know either.
affairs.
I don't, I
with
mean, I
respect
never
to
went to a small school.
students
so
in other
What would
I don't know how much
typically
they
fall? Do our
travel,
kids still
go
have
to
to
other
follow our
places.
dress codes? Do they still have to follow
Yeah.
our codes of conduct? Do they still have to follow? Right, so they're still our students, so I think it would make most sense for them to have to follow our policy in this.
No, I understand that, but that, like, I'm just asking, like, we're, like, exactly what you said, there are students, they should follow our policy, but that's, should it be our, like, that's not a policy,
What's not a policy?
traveling to other places. Like, should it be written in?
Should it be written in the, I mean, I think in the handbook, it's pretty clearly defined that students that are traveling to other districts or other schools are bound to
Under they're
for
still our
policies.
students, yeah.
I think that would sufficiently cover that issue.
They still have to, it's kind of a duality thing, you know, they still have to follow the expectations of the school that they're attending as well.
Mhm.
So, and I would say that it would be very difficult for police staff.
For us.
The rest of the police block.
Whether or not a kid's wearing a mask in Littleton.
Yeah, how do you know?
Yeah, that's gonna be impossible for us to police it.
I don't think that should weigh on our decision, though.
No.
I think that's one of those variables that is out of our control.
Is there any feedback from the staff as to what they prefer or don't prefer?
Several staff are part of the reopening committee and spoke up last night. I can't speak to individual comments, but several staff are present, are part of the reopening committee.
I think you'll find a list of folks that were members of the committee included in the,
Oh, yeah, well, I did see that. I just wonder if there was any discussions during the day in any of these meetings or anything that this was discussed with the staff, if they had any feedback or.
We had a staff meeting today. We talked about bringing this forward to the board. I would say that the staff, we didn't have a whole lot of talk about it. There was kind of a little bit of a sigh, I would say. I would say there's mixed emotions, just like we had with the meeting yesterday. I would say there's a lot of staff members that thought that this is a step backwards, but I also think there's a lot of people that would be supportive of that, and they'll deal with it either way. I did get a couple of emails from parents and students expressed some disappointment, as you know, I had a student tell me that that's the whole reason he got vaccinated, because he wanted to come to school and not have to wear a mask. And then I had a parent, email me as well just recently about, expressing the difficulties that it would be in having their child come back and not be able to see individual faces. So that's kind of my feedback right now.
Thank you.
So on page 6, looking at the rubric, it's, whether you can unmask or not, is based on level of community transmission, minimal, moderate, and substantial. Who determines those numbers? Is that specifically on the DHHS website?
Yes.
Those specific numbers?
Yes.
Perfect. And the CDC and the DHHS are still recommending that all individuals that are not vaccinated wear masks when around other people, indoors, public, where they can't be 6 feet apart. So we're following the CDC guidelines, even if we're at a minimal transmission rate, the entire elementary school will still have to be masked, correct?
Well, I think that the New Hampshire DHHS guidelines, which is the ones that we're going to be relying on because they're more local to our school and more relevant to our situation, make the recommendations based on community transmission rates and cases within the facility. So I think that right now, whether you are vaccinated or not is not really factored in because we have no way of knowing who is and who isn't vaccinated. There's no good way of determining that.
Well,
Or
I
track-
mean,
or
the
track.
elementary school is pretty easy to do
Well,
that.
sure.
But sure, yeah.
And I
So
thought I read that today on the New Hampshire NHDHS website, or it was the .gov website, that they are still recommending that all unvaccinated people wear masks when they can't be 6 feet apart
of
and
course,
outside.
that's been all along. Yeah,
Right.
that's never changed.
That,
So
that hasn't changed, so that would mean that all of our elementary students at all times will wear masks, other than outside and 6 feet apart, will wear masks, even if we get down to a minimal.
I guess that's
Transmission
right. That's
rate.
a bridge we'll have to cross when we get there. But I understand what you're saying, and it sounds like, yes, that would be
Yeah.
what the recommendation was. So yes,
And a good part of our middle school as well.
right.
I mean, the point of the reopening plan is to identify not what we're going to be doing for the entire year, but how we're going to be evaluating what we're doing throughout the year.
And
So we know for now that everybody's going, that based on
Everybody's
this,
gonna be
everybody would be wearing masks. At some point, we may be allowed to have students not wear masks, but at this
So we
point,
may be allowed, I mean, the school board will make that decision.
well, the idea would be, is that based on the information here and the matrix that they've provided for us to make that decision, the administration can put together the information that is necessary to make that decision, and the board will talk about it at the normal school board meetings. Probably second meeting every month is what it would probably turn out to be, since the
And
first one would be September 22nd.
Once we have, if we get down to minimal transmission and we can unmask, that's still a board decision, correct?
I mean, I think that would be the appropriate route to take.
That's what was determined last night, that it would be, right, the guidance and the reopening plan, submitting a proposal, and ultimately the board's decision. Correct. Is that correct? Yeah. Perfect.
Because any edits to this is coming through the board first to make that determination.
Yeah, I mean, we're voting on the plan as it sits tonight, and so as far as any future edits, I think that, any future edits, I guess, would probably go through the reopening plan, or the reopening committee first, and then be proposed to the board that way.
So I'm new to it. I came in late. I couldn't, I ran over.
Sorry, we're not taking public comment at this
So
point.
have you?
We're,
already
sorry,
taken
we're
input from
not
parents?
taking public comment
Yeah,
at this
just
point.
following orders.
We're not taking public comment at this point.
People online cannot hear you because not only are you masked, but also you're speaking quietly, so people have sent me text messages that they can't fully hear what you're saying. And so I'd like to, if you could please speak up, enunciate, and speak loudly, because there's a lot, it should be able to carry, because this is a gymnasium and voices can be heard. I was just curious, because I missed this, because I was
We just need to move on.
going where the.
Yeah, we're not
meeting-
taking public comment or questions at this point.
So.
Please stop talking or you'll be asked to leave.
Have parents had their moment to speak yet? That's all I want to know.
No, we are not taking public comment at
Because
this
it
point.
sounds like you're saying this is what it is, and we're going to submit this. And if parents don't have an input, I don't know why we're here.
We're not taking
What-
public
what
comment
we
at
have
this
in
point.
the board.
We just haven't reached that part of the
Oh,
meeting
that's
yet.
all I wanted to know,
Okay,
because
yeah.
you're
So that's-
talking in terms of like, this is
Yeah.
what we're going to submit it, this is the way it is. So that probably means you're not going to listen to what anybody else has to say. That's all I want to know. Are you going to listen to any input, or have you made a decision?
There's always a portion for public comment at the end of the meeting.
But
And
you're
so
not gonna listen to that.
right now, we're speaking as a board,
Okay.
and then Jay will address when it's time for the
But there's a
public to speak.
motion on the table.
It's
So
your
there's-
perception whether or not we listen to you. That's the process. So we're still meeting as a board.
Let's move on.
So is there any further discussion from the board about this issue, or any further questions from the board about the plan at this point?
I had one question. I know at the reopening committee yesterday, it was brought up about a special event, like a wellness fair.
Open house.
An open house.
Yeah.
And I didn't see anything in this plan about hosting special events. And I don't know if that needs to be openly addressed as.
Yeah, I think in the visitors.
I'm not talking about like specific visitors coming to the event. I'm talking about if we're gonna host a science fair or something like that. And I'm not sure if those things happened last year, but should we call that out as still happening or?
Did it happen last year, or did we do it kind of?
It did not.
So it didn't happen last year. We didn't have big gatherings. We had limited visitors even.
There were a couple events at the end of the year, more specifically for the seniors and their parents.
Yeah.
And it was very, mass social distance, very well done, so that the seniors and, some of the sports teams and such could get the recognition they deserve, but without open to the public participation type, more for parents than, and those kids than anything.
And you're right, we did bring that up last night, and we didn't really discuss it fully, whether or not it makes sense to.
I would say that last year, basically, the administration was
Yeah.
left with the discretion to make, the decisions on those types of events, whether to have them or not. I think largely most events didn't happen, but when there was an event, it was protocols seemed to be followed as far as masking and things of that nature. So I'm comfortable
When the opportunity
giving them that
arises,
continued discretion.
when the opportunity arises to do it safely, it's the administration made that decision.
Or like, couldn't we include that in the monthly consideration?
And I do think that for the most part, most of
We got enough
the
anyway, right?
most of the things that did come up were talked about with the board as far as like what was coming, who was going to be allowed to be there, and we were given the opportunity to weigh in, although largely I think didn't, because it was mostly.
No.
Yeah, well, no, it was just a lot of like, it seemed well thought through.
Yeah.
So
So how does administration feel about that right now, having open house?
So when we look at open house and some of the things that we've discussed, a couple of years ago, if you remember, prior to COVID, we had a community health fair kind of center thing, and we allowed for people to talk about different clubs that we have, different outings that are going on. We brought resources in from the outside. So this year is going to be very similar, except that those people who provided those resources are not coming in. What they're going to do is they're going to give us literature, and they're going to give us things that we can have on static display, and we'll invite families and students and teachers. We're not inviting other programs, things like that. And again, it's going to be divvied up between elementary school and high school, middle school. So some families might go back and forth, but we're allowing students to go back and forth.
So it sounds like it will happen, but it's a modified approach.
Correct.
Just as needed.
any other questions? So at this point, we would normally take a vote, although I think unless there's a consensus against it. Sorry.
We just have a question.
Sure.
For administratively. What would the board recommend for, if there are those who refuse to wear the mask?
With students that refuse to wear the mask, I think would be the same thing as if the student refused to comply with other aspects of the dress code. We have a school disciplinary policy, and we would expect that the school would apply the disciplinary policy as it's laid out for students who refuse to follow the rules. Well, let's just say that would be my interpretation of it, I guess. And I don't know if I don't speak for the entire board on that, but
No, I
that's.
think that's reasonable.
So unless there's a consensus against doing so, I think it'd be appropriate at this point to open up for community input. Normally we do that at the end, but prior to the vote.
We have
open it up.
several staff members. Can we recognize them first?
Sure, we can do that. Yep. And then
public, absolutely.
and then the public, and then we'll have the vote afterwards. Just for anyone that intends to speak, if you could just limit your comments to 3 minutes, that's our normal policy. And we'll try to get through everybody, give everybody an opportunity to speak. So with staff members, is there anyone from the staff that wanted to have a comment? Okay, we'll open it up for public comment.
I'd like to go first. I have no problem doing that.
Can you just state your name for the?
Sure, Amy Barnaby. And the first thing I'd like to say is there were students who feel lied to because they were told, if you get this vaccination, so they took this gene therapy into their bodies because they could not do well in school with a mask on their face, cutting off all day long. What they were saying, they couldn't hear the teachers either. They couldn't learn a darn thing. So they went. I said, okay, I'm going to get the vaccination because I've been told by Herr Fauci that if I get this, I will be able to sit in my classroom without a mask on. I know several of them in our neighborhood that they're like, no, my mom researched it. You know, despite all the VAERS things about all of the different things, tremors and all those things, they said, I need to do this because I can't learn with a mask on. Now you're putting a mask back on them. That's wrong. That is absolutely wrong. It's wrong that you're listening to Fauci, who has lied repeatedly. We are now a year and a half from 15 days to stop the spread. I'm telling you to wake up and stop this nonsense. The Nuremberg laws say that you'll all be held responsible, all of you. In India, they have a firing squad of people who stopped therapeutics for COVID-19, because we know there are therapeutics, very simple, very cheap therapeutics that can take care of it, where you won't go to the hospital, you won't have anything happen. But my concern is the children who have said, yeah, I'm vaccinated, I got the vaccination, several of them. And this is going to be really difficult for them to swallow, whether it's 2 weeks, 4 weeks, because we all know what happens with 2 weeks to stop the spread. It's 4 weeks. And now we have to get another booster. And now you can't stop. You can't ever stop it. It's up to you to stop it. So I'm concerned about that. That makes me really sad for those kids. My kids, I can homeschool them. We're putting masks on kids. My kids are back home. They were looking forward. They were excited to be back in the class, to have it like, finally, we're going to be there. We got their schedules. They're not going. They will not go. Because all summer long, they spit on each other in the water. They played with all kinds of Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut, whomever, at the water park. They've been around people all summer. Nobody's been sick. My husband just got tested at his job. He doesn't have it. None of us have it. There's no variant. The variants are in the vaccinated people, but nobody has the variants. Nobody has anything. So it's really sad that we have to do this. I understand you're listening to the CDC, but if you go to the May 2021 CDC guidelines, and it's tricky, you have to read through it all, it says that ventilation was the #1 thing that reduced COVID, not masks. They found masks were, it was like, yeah, 21 here, 20% here, 21% there. But the real thing was ventilation, the HEPA filters, all of those things really had an impact on whether or not the spread was there. So, you know, unless we're going to give our kids true mask, because everything in the CDC, if you look at it, it says worn properly, which means you're taking that thing off 2-3 times a day because it gets sweaty, it gets wet. How many of you truly have worn it non-stop for 7 hours?
Thank you, Ms.
6
Barnaby.
hours.
Your time is up.
I just ask you, it's wet and gross. So unless we're going to provide them for the kids repeatedly and help the kids understand when to take them off, they cannot be worn properly. We're better off taking them off.
Thank you for your input. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Okay. We have a motion on the floor to approve the plan as amended and put forward to the board tonight from the reopening committee.
You want to say something?
Oh, yeah.
This is Morris.
Yep, if you could just, sorry,
Yeah.
Ms. Morris, could you just come up and,
Speaking as a parent, I am a teacher here, but I'm not going to go there. I guess it's from a parent and from the political process. I've never in my life spoken out at a meeting like this, ever. but I feel pretty strongly about this. And I want to say that you are elected by the people of this town to listen to the people of the town, to see what they want. It's not your decision making. And I feel like maybe you need to poll the parents and find out what the parents want to do. Right? I went home today and told my two children, 16 and 14 years old, that they will be wearing masks. I can't even tell you what they said. My 14-year-old wrote an email to Mr. Pribernow. I don't even ask the parents, poll the parents, find out what they want. Masks should be optional. Kids want to wear masks, or their families want them to wear masks. It should be optional.
Thank you for your input. So with the motion still on the floor, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, signify by saying nay. Nay. So we have 6 ayes, 1 nay. The motion carries. The plan is approved. I'll accept the motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, Joe, motion second. Jasmine, thank you. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
I almost did it again.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.
I'm going to oppose it.